Morning everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Matt. On this channel I discuss primarily the ownership experience of the Model 3. I've got about 54,000 miles on it at this point, as well as I do some interesting projects in my workshop and things related to the car, as well as other small electric vehicle related items, small electric go-karts, that kind of thing. Today's discussion, I wanted to talk about battery charge habits, and I've done videos on things you should know about charging, but I wanted to make a video regarding what do I do specifically. So here we've got an image of my car, and you can see it's charged. Actually, right now it's at 87% state of charge. Now, I wanted to explain my philosophy on charging and a couple interesting little specifics about what I do with my car. So first off, there is what they call the 80-20 rule, and that is that with lithium chemistry batteries, it's generally best, if at all possible, to keep the charge between 80% at the high end and 20% at the low end. Now, that's not a hard, fast rule. That is a general guideline. So, for instance, you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be at 14% or 12% by the time I get home, I'm going to hurt the battery. That's not the case at all. But what the deal is, or you don't have to worry about charging to 90% or 100%, you're going to somehow hurt the battery. That's not the case. What the situation is, basically, is for day-to-day usage, it's best to charge up to 80%. You could charge to 90% daily even. But the closer you stay toward the center of the charge, in general, the better the longevity is of your battery. It's sort of like changing the oil in your gas car every 3,000 or 5,000 miles or whatever the service interval they recommend. Warming the car up before you run it hard and that kind of thing. If you go a little too long before an oil change, or if you run the car a little bit harder than you normally would, you're not going to hurt it. But if you do that every single time, all the time you use the car, well, you will, over an extended period of time, reduce its life a bit. And that's kind of the situation with lithium batteries. If you stay between 20 and 80%, 20 at the low end, obviously 80 at the high end, in general, the battery longevity will be a bit higher. So there's a lot more out there, and I've done videos getting more in depth on that, and this video isn't that side of it. I just wanted to lay that foundation so that when I explain my philosophy on the battery, we don't need to get into that side topic as much, because again, I've already covered how to maximize the longevity of a lithium battery. But what today's video specifically is about is little tricks, little tips that I have for little things that I do with my battery, and how you guys can apply this to your lives. So principle number one, I normally will, as soon as I get done driving my car, I plug it in right away. There's sort of a general kind of a philosophy of what they call the ABCs of EVs, and ABCs would be always be charging. So, and that's something that I heard years ago, and it does kind of hold true, especially if you're charging your car on a 110 volt or 120 volt outlet rather than a high current 240. You really have to be plugged in. If you're not driving the car, you got to be plugged in, because you're really only going to be receiving about 6 miles or so of driving range for every hour your car is plugged in. So that's rule number one. But let's assume you have a 240 charger for your car, and most people do. The next principle beyond always be charging is that it's good to not have the car sit at a low state of charge. So when I get home, I drive my car a lot. I drive on average 160 miles a day. 120 would be at the low end. I've driven 240 miles in a day just for my normal work, not traveling, just for my normal work. So by the time I get home, I have anywhere from as little as 25 miles of driving range up to I'd say normally it'd be 70 or 80 miles of driving range left in the pack when I get home. And so it's easier on the battery to, if it's going to be sitting for any length of time, to sit closer toward a 50 or I think 60% state of charge is the ideal resting voltage for batteries, or state of charge for batteries. Anyone that's an expert on this could chime in and correct me on that if you'd like. But typically, it's best if the car's going to sit for any length of time, let it sit at about a 60% state of charge. So when I get home from work, I don't want it to sit, low on a charge. That's a little harder on the battery. So as soon as I get home, I'll plug it in. Even though I'm on 240, so I don't necessarily need to be charging all the time, always be charging, like, again, if you have a 110, 120 volt outlet. But it's still, as soon as I get out of the car, I plug in, primarily because, again, I don't want the battery sitting at that low state of charge. It's kind of hard on the battery. So item number 2, if I stop at home in the middle of my day, I will plug in. And that kind of goes back again to rule number 1, which is always be charging. But if I stop at home for lunch or something, I'll plug the car in, if for no other reason than to gain an extra 25, 30 miles of range by doing that. And this can be especially important in the wintertime when it's really cold out, because now just the act of driving the car around will warm the battery somewhat, but letting the battery sit, it will get cooler and cooler. And the battery it's best for the battery to be kept around 70 or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So in the middle of my work day in the winter, I try to go home, plug the car in, and that allows the battery to gain a little bit more charge. In the winter time, you have less range anyway, so you recoup some of that. Number 2, it does warm the battery on its own. Number 3, I can turn the climate control on and turn the heated seat on to keep the cabin, or warm the cabin up further without shortening my driving range that day, because I'm plugged in and I'm going to be using energy off of the wall to do that. So that's another item. And so the last little tip that I'm going to give you for today is, what I will typically do is I set my car for 80% state of charge maximum. So what I'll do then is I'll get home and I will plug my car in, and it's set to stop charging at 80%. Okay, wonderful. Well, that 80% then, it hits that 80% within just a few hours. Now, if I know that I want to use more range than the 80% in the following day, for me personally, I always get up about an hour and a half or so before I need to leave for my work day. So what I will oftentimes do, I did it this morning, is I'll get up and immediately tell my car to start charging again. Just go into the phone app and move that maximum state of charge from the previously set limit of 80%, move it up to 90 or 100% or whatever, and let it sit there and charge while I prepare for my work day. And that does a few things. Number 1, going back to the wintertime scenario, in wintertime, I get up in the morning and the battery is just freezing cold. So, and it's hard on the battery. So what I will do then is turn the charge on, because the car will automatically begin to warm the battery while it charges. So you'll get in the car and the battery will already be then somewhat preconditioned for your workday. What I can also do in the winter then is turn on the climate control to warm up the car, because then I don't need to get in the car and turn it on and deplete a lot of my range by warming up the car and heating the seats. I can do it from the app. So in the winter, I get up, I turn on the charging from the app, I turn on the cabin heat and the seat heat to get the car prepared for when I get in. So now the cabin's warm and the battery has had a chance to warm up through the charging process. But in the summertime, I still will oftentimes do this if I know. So today I knew that I was going to need to drive more than that 80% would give me a safe buffer at the end of the day. So I got up this morning and immediately turned it up to 90% and let it sit there and charge. And what that does is it gives me more range without having the car sit at a very high state of charge for a period of time. And because that is what's primarily hard on the battery, is sitting at either a very high or very low state of charge. So for instance, charging your car to 100% and then driving it right away really isn't hard on the battery. Now for day-to-day use, it's still best to peak at 90%. But if you're going to charge it to 100%, no big deal. The main thing is don't charge to 100%, let it sit there for a long time, like days on end. What you want to do is charge to 100% and then time it so that you can get in the car and drive it as quick or as short period of time sitting at 100%. So if I know I need to leave at 7 a.m., it'd be nice to know that it'll be done charging at 6:45 or whatever, just a few minutes before I leave. So it's only at that 100% for a few minutes. So these are little things that I do, and you don't need to be fastidious about it and ridiculous, but it is kind of a good general rule of thumb. I get up, turn it up, let it charge a little bit faster or a little bit higher, and while I'm doing paperwork, get out in the car, start driving, and that charge goes from 80 to maybe 90 or 95%, and then I'll drive it right back down. And that's kind of a neat little tip. A lot of people assume that, well, just set the charge limit where it is. When you get home at night, plug it in, and it'll charge up to 90%, 95%, whatever you have it set for, and it'll sit like that overnight, ready for you in the morning. Well, it's good to be ready in the morning, but again, it's probably best to charge to 80% or 90% or whatever, and if you want to go above that point, start the charge from your phone app shortly before you leave, maybe an hour before you leave or so, to kind of peak it up further, then go out to the car and start driving. So those are some little tips for you guys, and that's just the way I treat my battery personally. But anyway, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you've not seen my steering wheel before, go ahead over the last dozen videos or so, and you'll see a video on this steering wheel, as well as I'm building another cut top flat bottom steering wheel out of composite panels. So having fun designing and manufacturing my own upgrade parts. So anyway, you guys have yourselves a wonderful day now. Take it easy.